How's it going, everyone? Hope you're all having an excellent Saturday. Life is busy at the moment, so I'm just kind of plugging these in wherever I can. Anywho, I'm back with some more Indonesian horror this time round, and I'm talking about another film by Rako Prijanto, the director of BAYI, AJAIB, which I also reviewed on this channel a while back. Betina, Pengikut Iblis. I'm positive I'm making a dog's breakfast out of that in my uncultured fucking mouth. Sorry, Indonesia, but there you go. Yeah, for anyone who's just listening, this is not an Italian movie, okay? This is not a giallo. It's Indonesian. It doesn't quite hit the mark the way that that one did, I'll be honest. And part of that is for a reason that I feel like I should just mention to people up front. This is not a complete movie, and I'm not saying that to be insulting. I'm saying that because it just kind of, right in the middle of a scene, ends with a big to be continued. Especially in a day and age where franchising has become a little bit more normal, I don't know why you couldn't just let people know going in that this is the first part of a movie and not an isolated feature film. It just makes it kind of hard for me to really review it conclusively when I haven't seen the whole story yet. On the other hand, I do have to judge a movie based on what's in front of me, not on what could come. I mean, it's sort of like if you're at a restaurant and someone serves you what you think is your entree, and then you're looking and saying, hey, wait a second, where's my mashed potatoes? Where's my sauteed green beans? Where's this and that? And someone says, oh, that part's still coming. We're still cooking that. And you're like, well, it would have been nice to know that before I ordered it, thank you very much. But that's the bitch session out of the way for now, and let's talk about the movie itself. And for the most part, as a horror movie, this starts out good and is watchable enough. Just like BAYI, AJAIB, you can really tell that Rako Prijanto is a big fan of things like Creepshow and Tales from the Crypt, and it just has that same sort of ghoulish tone to it, which, at least in my opinion, accounts for what some people have criticized as overacting. And yes, these young actresses, as good as they are really exploding right over the brim. I think this all is actually intended to be a little bit tongue-in-cheek. Admittedly, there are a couple of moments with the character Sumi where I was asking myself, like, is this supposed to be funny or am I supposed to be taking this seriously right now? To the degree that her performance feels a bit inconsistent, I honestly think that that is just mostly a product of the fact that Rako Prijanto just doesn't have as much of a confident grasp and forward thrust with the material like he did in BAYI, AJAIB. But kind of like Olivia Wilde did in Don't Worry Darling, Prijanto does at least do a pretty decent job of making you think he's got a plan up until those closing moments. The character Sumi's whole story with her deadbeat dad and his history as an addict, and the way that she ends up helping him, quite literally eat himself to death, I was just relishing all of that. It was pulpy, it was lurid, it was blood-soaked, it was full of malicious intentions, totally overwrought and perfectly melodramatic. That whole thread I was really enjoying. And I kind of liked the one involving the young girl who is actually a witch, although that one didn't really get sort of woven in until the end. And even that didn't bother me initially. I kind of thought that they were pulling a Sicario and bringing in a character who was just kind of lurking on the sidelines for most of the movie and suddenly comes in out of nowhere and ends up sort of taking command of the narrative. That could have been the way that it went with a more concluded script, but that doesn't quite happen. And then there's one more major female character who has a bit of a history with Sumi's dad, but the way that she is sort of finally dropped into the mix in a meaningful way, it is... I don't even know if talking about it would constitute a spoiler or not, given that it literally ends with "to be continued." But nevertheless, I'll let people form their own opinions about that, except to say that it comes dangerously close to literally just slapping a tinfoil hat on someone and shoving them out in front of the camera and saying, here's the real bad guy. And man, I'm caught in a web. I want to talk about how much I enjoyed the atmosphere and the gore and the performances and the location in this movie. All of that was just fantastic. But this is an unfinished story. And based on my most recent glance at IMDB, I don't see anything on there indicating that that there's a sequel in production or in development. There's a part of me that suspects that they did it to be continued just because they didn't actually know how to end this story. I think if they intended to do it this way, maybe doing a mini-series that focused on each female character individually would have been a better approach. Based on what we have here, I feel like just focusing this first movie on the story with Sumi and her father would have been a perfect amount for a nice, lean little B movie. That storyline does deliver. It's just that it's kind of got that Batman v Superman syndrome going on where it's trying to be its own movie and juggle a franchise setup at the same time. I will say that if you are just kind of in the mood to scratch that gore itch and you don't really care if the story is coherent or not, and you're just looking for a 90-minute blood ride, this movie gives you that. And it gives it to you like Prijanto's previous film did, with very competent, effective technique. You get a lot of that Stephen King-esque small town simmering tension between townsfolk that he used so well in BAYI, AJAIB here as well. It's just too bad that he couldn't quite decide, apparently, which story he wanted to tell in this one. So overall, if you're a horror fan, and an Indonesian horror fan in particular, I can still recommend this movie, but just, go in with sort of your expectations in check because, again, you're not getting a finished story here. I'm sorry to be that blunt and redundant, but it happens to be the truth. This is not finished. It's enough to keep me invested in Rako Prijanto as a filmmaker. I still can't wait to see what he does next. I certainly hope it's the part 2 to this. Hopefully next time round he does actually streamline, organize, and focus his ideas just a little bit more sharply. Anyway, that's about all I can say about this one for now. Hope you guys are having an awesome weekend. Look for periodic videos dropping here and there where I can fit them in under the circumstances, and I will see you next time.